You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to the 40th episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Franke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our website and discuss the implications they might have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving us a positive review. Finally, if you want to reach any of us, you can reach us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Anna, how are you doing this week?
Great. I know you warned me that this was our 40th, but until I heard it out loud, wow, I was not ready.
Right? Jeff,
exciting.
Jeff, we're coming up on a year.
Hard to believe we're still going, David. I've only been bleeped once.
Hard to believe.
Do you say that on your anniversary? That's a weird thing to say.
I do say that on my anniversary. Who knew, right? I mean,
Can't believe we're still here.
Families certainly weren't betting on us, right?
Doing this again.
Before we jump into it, I want to do a special shout out to Mark and Jerry. Thank you both very much for reaching out with some of the kind words regarding the podcast. We really do appreciate all of our listeners out there. All right, let's jump into the first story this week. Smithfield workers are fed up. Employees at the Smithfield pork processing plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, say they are, quote, fed up with the company. According to the United Food and Commercial Workers local union, workers are upset over increased production line speeds, verbal abuse, and the removal of sanitation and other safety measures. The conditions are reportedly causing high numbers of injuries, grievances, resignations, and, quote, overall unhappiness. The company says it was surprised by the claims and disagreed with its employees. 4 months ago, the union signed a new contract increasing wages, adding a bonus, and providing more options for breaks and leaves of absence. Since then, the union claims workers have since been forced to work overtime, sometimes in different departments. Anna, what do you take on this update from Smithfield?
Well, I thought it was interesting because Smithfield in the report, it says that Smithfield said that they were surprised by the pushback from workers. Mm-hmm. I think they're perhaps not acknowledging the general atmosphere that food workers have been dealing with coming off the pandemic. I mean, we ran a story last week where the AP reported that the government had adjusted some figures on just how bad the COVID outbreak had hit meatpacking. Mm-hmm. The article claimed that at least 59,000 meatpacking workers had caught COVID-19 last year, and 269 workers died.
Whoa.
Which is about 3 times higher than what was being reported by their union.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so they had, adjusted some of those over time. But I remember reading reports during the pandemic about how bad things were for meat workers, especially at Smithfield, where people were like frantic and terrified, and Smithfield workers were like suing the company because they didn't feel like they were being protected against, catching COVID. Mm-hmm. I feel like if Smithfield thinks that they can just sort of put this in the past, like draw a hard line, like this part of it is over, we're moving on and doing what we want, I don't think it accounts for the significance and the severity of that experience for those workers. Mm-hmm. And I also think that the worker shortage that exists now that did not exist at that time is maybe giving a voice to some of those workers where back in 2020, quitting, speaking up, things like that, where there was more of a barrier. The economy was very fragile. People were really concerned about, can I keep my job? Will I keep my job? Mm-hmm. Now there's more opportunities for manufacturing workers. So maybe they're going to see more of this from their staff standing up and saying, look, maybe we're not over this. What happened to it? You can't just like sweep it under the rug, move on, and then try to really apply a ton of pressure on these employees who have been through a lot, honestly.
I don't want to say sour grapes, but is this them being upset that they renegotiated first?
I don't know. I mean, that's a fair question to ask, but I don't think it takes away from the fact that this has been a really traumatic, 2-year period for those workers.
Understood. Jeff, what's your take on Smithfield?
I think the management of that company is so far disconnected from the operating environment that they don't have an appreciation for what these workers have gone through and are going through right now. Mm-hmm. They feel like they've already extended the olive branch, so to speak, and they've got a new contract in place. What they're failing to appreciate is that $18.75, which is the new base hourly pay, that doesn't mean what it did 20 months ago. Mm-hmm. That is not the same. That isn't competitive with service industries. That isn't competitive with retail. Mm-hmm. So for them to feel like they've done enough at this point, they're just not understanding the situation. It was also very alarming when workers start talking about sanitation and safety issues in a food processing plant.
Right.
That can never be a thing. Like at a minimum, you should feel safe and clean in a food processing plant. There's 3,600 workers in this facility. There's all sorts of potential issues, not even related to worker safety, but just product safety that could come out of that type of dynamic. So that is extremely concerning. I also saw in a statement that Smithfield said they spent $800 million globally on worker protection.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or does that seem like they're fudging some numbers there?
Seems
Like,
high.
what did they include in worker protection? I mean, does that include like
A fresh mask every 5 minutes.
I mean, how do you spend that much?
Well,
even?
they didn't have any PPE on hand, so they likely, bought while the market was really hot and got gouged. I'm sure that was it.
Also, weren't
Something.
food workers like already wearing masks and gloves? Like,
Right. They should be wearing gowns, hairnets, all
Yeah,
of
like,
those
that's already
types
a
of
thing.
things. So that number blew me away, which again, I think sort of supports the disconnect that they have between what is going on in their facilities. This is hard work. This is extremely taxing work. And to be somewhat unsympathetic and basically be like, hey, look, we already did our thing.
Yeah.
I think that's really naive. And I think there is the potential because of the size of this facility, again, 3,600 people working here. If they don't get something going here, okay, food workers, I mean, there's lot going on. I mean, we talked about Frito-Lay, that strike's been settled. Kellogg's, I believe, is still ongoing.
Yep.
If these folks go on strike or if they do something more, I know they've got an agreement in place, but that could really impact the whole supply chain for pork processing in this country.
Which is already
And if that bleeds into other workers saying, hey, you know what, Smithfield is doing it in Sioux Falls, we should be looking more closely at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if that's there's sort of a ripple effect there, they have a huge impact on this industry.
I think some of the sanitation and safety measures that were removed were some of those extra layers of protection that were put in for COVID and have since been removed. I mean, maybe they just dried up before they didn't want to spend another $200 million.
Is
Why would
COVID
you
over
remove it?
though? Last I checked, we still got a lot of problems. So.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's good.
Right. Yeah.
Why would you go through the effort of removing something?
Yeah.
If the workers clearly wanted it, what's the big deal? Leave it there.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting was that they're bringing in workers from different departments, and I just find it fascinating because we're hearing more about it. We heard about it at John Deere and other companies that aren't on strike, but just looking to fill some hours. Can you be, if part of the plant is on strike and you're brought in from a different department to help cover, are you an internal scab?
I mean, if you're not part of the union, what are you going to do in solidarity that's not going to put your job at risk,
Right.
That's the hard part, I think, for these workers.
I feel like that really puts them in a difficult situation.
It does. It 100% does.
And I mean, a very risky situation, as we saw with John Deere and, the ambulance being rushed there within hours of unqualified people doing different jobs.
Yeah.
One thing that also struck me was that are corporate statements being created by AI randomizers now? Because it's just some mix of shock, disappointment with a vague rebuttal and a little bit of chest thumping. And that's just all of them. Just like, my goodness, I never could have imagined that our happy workers at our lovely, clean facility would ever be upset. Also, we're doing banging numbers right now.
Well, I just think it, not to keep beating that drum, but like it just goes back to that disconnect. And this is an industry, again, we've talked about how tight the margins are. Worker pay has not always been great. It's considered a lesser skilled workforce potentially when you're talking about meat processing. And I think this whole dynamic of now more power and more sway shifting to the workforce, this management has just not adjusted and they're just not getting it.
They're not used to it either.
Yeah.
I think like as part of it, how many times, like we just came off this, in the pandemic when people were like going to work, even though they were afraid of getting sick because they knew that they had to.
Yeah.
And
Right.
now they don't.
Yeah.
Well, and we saw this with the people at Kellogg's, but even after they renegotiated, they're still being forced to work weekends and in different departments. That's going to cause, even if they were happy with the $175 bump and the $520 bonus they received, you can't be happy if you're making more money if you can't spend it or have a good balance, a work-life balance.
Well, it's going to impact product quality. I mean, we're looking at potential prices increases for food, which we've already realized.
Oh, yeah.
So now if these workers do get more, which it seems like they probably should, that's going to increase prices there too. It eats into margins potentially. So I think that's what a lot of management is probably looking at right now. And it's just this paradigm shift on numerous fronts they're just struggling with.
Right. Let's move on to our next story. Tesla's software recall may head off fight with U.S. regulators. Tesla issued a recall to fix a safety problem in its electric vehicles, hoping to curtail a likely confrontation with U.S. safety regulators. The recall was automatically sent as a software update and covers nearly 12,000 Teslas with a glitch in the full self-driving software. The glitch can make cars stop for no reason. The recall covers all 4 Tesla models, and the glitch actually came from a software update about a week prior. A day after the update, Tesla received reports of, quote, phantom braking. The recall shows that Tesla is willing to issue a recall when it pushes out software updates to fix safety issues. It also sets a precedent for other automakers to do the same. Regulators have been on the company to know why it didn't recall vehicles when it sent a software update to fix the problem with autopilot that addressed problems detecting emergency vehicles parked on roads while crews were responding to crashes. Anna, is this just Tesla giving regulators a softball?
I think it's an important softball if that's what it is. I mean, a step in the right direction for sure. I mean, I think you can argue that the net benefit of using an over-the-air update, especially for something that's safety related, is far better than the slow process of manual or mechanical updates that like take months or years to fully realize. Like, not to mention many automakers are putting the onus on the consumers to take in their vehicles for service, which dramatically decreases the effectiveness of those recalls. But I think we have to look at transparency as having equal importance here, because if Tesla has a safety problem and they fix it right away and don't see the need to let anyone know that that's been done, I mean, are you comfortable with that? Like, how many times are you comfortable with that? Like, if, you know, maybe Tesla has 10 in a year, maybe they have 100. At what point, like, I think at some point it makes a difference to me knowing what is happening there. I mean, I think you could make the argument that if recalls are not occurring, but updates are, that it makes it easier for automakers to maybe rush certain technologies to market and then kind of tweak them and fix them along the way, because there's not this big dramatic, I don't know, news cycle around this recall.
Right.
Isn't that exactly what we're worried about with Tesla to begin with?
Yeah.
So to me, this is actually a really important step. I know it feels like a softball because it seems like kind of a no-brainer, but I think they need to be doing it. I think they all need to be doing it.
No, I think you're right. Recalls in particular, if anything, they let potential buyers know of potential issues as well as regulators, but, you know, it's a more informed public. Jeff, how do you feel about automatic software updates on your car?
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's a positive thing. It streamlines the whole process. And I think that's what NHTSA was sort of having a hard time with at first, not understanding that, because they have a process that they go through in terms of mailing out people who have this vehicle, letting them know what's going on.
Postcards.
Then they take it to the dealership. The dealership tells them what happened. There's coding, there's processing, there's data all over the place. Whereas Tesla just basically said, you know what, we can just do this. We're not going to go through that whole process. We can just do this. I think NHTSA was a little bit taken aback initially. I think they've come around, or hopefully will come around. It seems like maybe I think we're going to have another story too, where Tesla was right in the approach to doing this. If they had a little bit more communication, which is their fault for not doing it, if they would have communicated a little bit more clearly with this agency, a lot of this would have been eliminated. There wouldn't be such a contentious dynamic that they would have had to offer up a softball or seem like they're being more appeasing than what they really are. You can invent the better mousetrap here, which Tesla kind of has. Yeah. But you have to help people understand how it works in this situation too.
I like the idea of software updates on a car, because one of the things when you take your car in to get any sort of service, what's one of the things they always tell you? Hey, no recalls. So there you go. Yeah. That's just such a bad way, of doing business, between that and the like rogue postcards, like you said, Anna, that look like junk mail. And it's like, oh no, actually, my airbag is going to explode and kill me.
Well, and remember how many people, they were like, we've recalled all these vehicles on those Takata airbags, and the actual like percentage of people who went in and got that fix done was like sadly low in comparison to how many were recalled. But it was because they cannot get in touch with people, because they send out a stupid postcard to your like address that you had when you bought the vehicle or whatever. Like, how do you track everybody down? No,
and and sometimes when we received one because it was like a tire sensor, and it's just if it's not mission critical, I'm not going to rush out to get it, because a lot of times when it's also hardware, because of supply chain issues, those parts aren't available. So I don't know. I think this is, again, it's just another example of Tesla doing the right thing, kind of the wrong way.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree. And I think it does set a great precedent for other automakers to take this same approach, especially in this case. This was a serious situation here with vehicles shutting off, essentially. I mean, yeah, the fact that they can flip a switch or send out a software upgrade where people just have to say, accept.
Yeah. We talk about like being that engineer on the other side where it's like you get that email and it says, hey, my car just stopped and turned off.
Yeah.
And then it's like, 1 is a fluke. And then you get like 10, 12, and you're like, oh dear, someone go look at the code. I couldn't imagine being in a car and it just completely died. Well, I can imagine it. I've certainly driven some beaters in my time. But if it was a new car and you didn't expect that, when I had a rag instead of a gas cap for a while, I expected some problems.
You were that guy.
You had a rag?
Yeah, I had a rag for oil and a rag for gas. It was just, and I didn't know you could buy an aftermarket gas cap. I was just like,
so you used like the most flammable thing that you could find,
it was
tucked in gasoline-soaked rag.
I had it wasn't soaked.
I'd be more concerned about the oil.
Yeah,
that's.
It was both. It was
that's crazy.
It was like an '88 Oldsmobile Olds. Like they didn't even it was just an '88 Old. And it was a death trap. When I sold that car, I was paid in change. It was awesome.
That's impressive.
It was a perfect ending to that relationship. All right, let's move on to our next most popular story. Startup applied for Meta trademark before Facebook. Facebook recently changed its name to Meta. Unfortunately, it looks like the company's status is complicated. It turns out that another company, Meta PCs, has already applied for the Meta trademark. The company sells computers and other hardware and seems to have beaten Zuck to the punch by nearly 3 months. And Meta is having some fun with it, with basic Photoshop skills, as well as a declaration that Meta PCs was changing its name to Facebook. See how we can have fun here? A federal trademark grants a company nationwide protection for its brand, but it doesn't mean a company legally owns any word, and it cannot prevent others from using it. Meta says it can all be settled, Jeff, for $20 million.
Do it. Give them some cash. They earned it just with those, I don't know, whatever you call them, the visuals that they provided with Mark Zuckerberg selling their computer equipment. That was fantastic.
Memes and viral videos.
Well done, Meta. I was surprised they even tried to defend, or why would you trademark a term like Meta? I understand the context, and that's a big part of it. Made me think about some other words that were actually trademarked, which I was surprised. And again, like you said, you can't enforce all of them. It's more the context in which they're used. But like baggies, superhero is trademarked, believe it or not. Yeah.
Really?
Marvel and DC actually share a trademark for superhero. I'm not sure how you would enforce that, but they do. Realtor was another one I was surprised. Onesie, there's a world you guys are living in. That's actually a trademark term.
Almost out of it.
So is ping pong. The other one this one made me think a little bit about was Twitter actually wanted the trademark for tweet.
Oh.
But a company that actually, they own like an advertising service related to Twitter, they actually owned the trademark for tweet to begin with.
A bird owns it, Jeff.
Yeah.
Is it?
Or it's even more clever of a name. It's Twitad was the company that initially trademarked the term tweet.
Wow.
So they had this, and there was some back and forth. And initially, a court ruled that Twitter sort of, initialized started the use of the word tweet. But in order for Twitter to actually get the copyright, they did end up paying this company some money for it. So they actually do have it. So there's, I guess, a little bit of precedence here.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it kind of pans out. Ideally, this computer company would get enough notoriety from this that maybe Zuckerberg and Facebook would have to pay him so they can have the copyright. The other thing that's kind of interesting, Facebook has a copyright on the word face for any application to social media. So nobody else can use face.
I suppose
whatever.
That's like Apple having a little eye, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
well,
all the trademark law you wanted.
Yeah. And I will say, while they have shown some marketing savvy, all the criticism for Facebook being called Meta and it being a terrible name, that's still on Meta PCs too. It's not like all of a sudden it's a good name now. Anna, finally a feel-good story about Facebook, huh?
I know. I enjoyed this story because discussions relating to Facebook lately have been very intense. And then they announced their dumb rebrand, and it was fun to like
Their
watch
dumb
it.
rebrand. That's what everybody's shooting for.
Right, I know. Well, it was like the timing of it was so transparent, and I know they're like, but it has nothing to do with this. It's like, well, we're not stupid. We know what's happening. Like you're like in a dumpster fire of drama right now. But it was fun to see it immediately be panned by like everyone in the world.
Yeah.
And then now they have this potential copyright issue, which is like funny. And I'm curious how this was not uncovered in the due diligence of like their legal team, which is probably well paid, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm hoping that Facebook settles with these guys. But even if they get bullied out of it, like TMZ said that they got a 5,000% increase in social followers just in the last week or so because of this drama.
great.
And as Jeff said, like, you know, their visuals were funny. Maybe Facebook will, I don't know, try to countersue them for putting Mark Zuckerberg's face and holding their product and pretending like he was selling it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how this settles.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, they're going to get a boost out of it regardless, I think, just because like everyone was having fun with it and they got a lot of exposure. So even if they do have to change their name eventually, they got a platform. So maybe.
Yeah. And honestly, they haven't talked about whether or not the $20 million figure is real, but it's also ridiculous that that's just a drop in the bucket for Facebook.
So just to clarify, Facebook, that term is not going away. It's just a product under the Meta umbrella?
No, it's more like Google Alphabet. When Google went through the exact same thing, when they're like, no, the company that owns Google is now called Alphabet.
Right,
And
so
everyone was just like, what? No, so I thought you were saying that Meta, like Facebook was going to own Meta.
No.
It's Meta that's,
Yeah, okay.
Sorry for misunderstanding that. I was wondering if also there are any worse name changes possible, like change your company name to Numbers or Conjunction, Spacebar.
Or the Washington Football Club?
That's actually not bad. It's growing on me.
Remember when Prince changed his name to that symbol and everyone was just like, and then like, I don't know, it never, I mean, you can't say it out loud. So
No.
it's just like,
Just gave you more words. The artist formerly known as Prince.
yeah.
Numbers, Conjunction, Spacebar, and Collective Consciousness, all taken actually already. Just because people having fun with the name.
I wonder how many
Too much.
how many names got like gobbled up like in the days leading up to, because remember how they announced way ahead of time that they were changing their name?
I mean, maybe that's why they took Spacebar.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm sure they didn't miss this. I'm sure that they saw and knew about Meta PC, and they're just like, it's just some small computer company out of California, I believe. You know, we'll just take it from them. We are the juggernaut that is Facebook.
And Facebook now owns the Meta, I think meta.com.
Yeah.
So like these other people did not have that URL.
No, it's probably metapcs.com.
So I don't know.
Net.
.biz.
Yeah, it's metapcs.biz. All right, let's move on to our next most popular story. Architect resigns from billionaire's, quote, psychological experiment. Charles Munger was Warren Buffett's right-hand man at Berkshire Hathaway, so he's done well for himself. 5 years ago, the 92-year-old Munger said that he would donate $200 million for new housing at the University of California, Santa Barbara. The only caveat was that his blueprints had to be followed exactly. Munger Hall, which cost $1.5 billion, would be the largest largest dorm in the world. An 11-story block that would house 4,500 students in small, single-occupancy rooms, most of which that didn't have windows. Charles' vision, as they call it, would encourage students to leave their tiny rooms and mingle with others in the building's common area. Other architects say Charlie's vision was cross-eyed and would have unknown potentially harmful impact on the undergrads. The project's consulting architect, Dennis McFadden, called it, quote, a social and psychological experiment. Anna, how bad was your dorm room in college? And does this sound like a preferable alternative?
No. And I had the worst dorm at UW-Madison, by the way.
Yeah.
I was in the I was in Og Hall, and it was like cinder blocks for sure, but we had windows, man. Like there was a lot of fires in the trash chutes, but we had windows. And I think even more importantly, we had windows because there was fires. And anyway, like this story read like dystopian sci-fi, and I was like really alarmed to see that UC Santa Barbara was just like willing to sign on to this project and just agree to the terms of this person.
Yeah. Take
Obviously,
that billion.
well, it was $200 million out of a $1.5 billion project.
Okay.
So it was not the entirety of that funding coming from this person. I know they're under a lot of pressure to add on-campus housing at this university in particular, because apparently part of their strategic goals to like get some of the students out of the surrounding communities. They must be living in these, neighboring towns. But I have to say, this does feel like a psychological experiment, and it could have, I think, some really undesirable side effects. I mean, for me, the lack of windows feels like a problem because a lack of daylight has been linked to stress and depression and other mental health issues. I think it's stressful enough to be a college student. I don't think we need to like force students to like flee the bleakness of their homes to like
you should be
more
able to
social.
know when it's nighttime and not.
Yeah. Like, what do we, that's such a backwards thing. I don't know. And I think like we could put them in dungeons to the same effect, but would we want to? I mean, that's horrible. So I don't know. I can't imagine, as I said before too, that it's like up to code from a fire safety standpoint. How would you, if there's a bunch of rooms and everybody's living in there and there's a fire and you can't get out or you can't open a window?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just really scary sounding. So
I think you
I don't
just
know.
scream and stampede.
I guess, yeah. So I don't know. It just seems like $200 million out of 1.5. Like they couldn't have done this without him, and maybe done it in a way that is like actually looking at the specific needs of students, and maybe that's why this architect walked away. I mean, I can see why he did.
I too had the worst dorm at my college, so much so that right after I moved out, they tore it down. Yeah, tore it down.
Mine's are also torn down. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't like an age thing. It was just, this is bad. We got to start over.
Yeah, we can't salvage this. It is.
They made a high rise with condo style dorms, and I'm like, well, that sounds a lot more pleasant.
The dorms are so nice now here.
Yeah.
And I had to live in a box.
Yeah, no, this can be the, old timey thing for this episode, but it's definitely like back in my day, it was a prison.
Taught me a lot about life though,
I made some everlasting relationships. Actually, no, I don't talk to any of those people anymore. Jeff, what was your dorm experience like?
It was pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Dorms at Whitewater were pretty solid. I was in a high-rise type, second apartment. It wasn't bad at all.
Very good. So 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
No, I loved it there. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Like I had a great time.
Yeah.
College was the best.
It was.
But it was not nice in there. No.
Very good. Jeff, about the prison for kids.
So first of all, just to give a little context on Charlie Munger, he was quoted as saying, did you see this quote? "I'd rather be a billionaire and not be loved by everybody than not have money."
Whoa.
He said this out loud.
Well, I mean,
He was being real honest
I'd
about
rather
it.
be a billionaire.
So basically, he's saying, "Look, I gave you kids a roof and some
Yeah, right.
walls. What are you complaining about?"
right? I think he's just quoting Scrooge McDuck.
Man.
"'Tis better to receive than to give," I believe is how it goes. Yeah.
So this guy definitely, he's consistent, I guess. The other thing that's kind of weird, so UCSB, they're known for just having this beautiful campus. It's a gorgeous area.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in Santa Barbara, it's
Yeah.
amazing, but it's also a little more expensive place. So to envision this square structure housing 4,500 students, that I can see where that does not fit in with the aesthetic of the area.
Yeah.
It seems like it is definitely misplaced in terms of where it's being done and the scale. I understand he wants to get people into like communal areas. How do you design a communal area for that many people? How do you make that work?
It's like a
You
town.
have plenty
Yeah.
of space when it's a 4x8, cell.
It's the rooms do look unappealing. Typically when you build $1 billion building on campus, that's a recruiting tool.
Oh, yeah.
Not so much here. If you took people through this, I don't think it'd be a selling point
Right.
for going to this otherwise beautiful university in a really cool area of California. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting thought, but not for a university in California for 4,000 kids. The location and the scale seems off.
I did think that it while a psychological experiment, it wouldn't necessarily be crazy that this became a thing. I mean, we've seen some crazy worker housing facilities, particularly in other countries,
Right. Yeah.
where they do have, no window cells that they live on campus.
And people are miserable.
Oh yeah, they jump off of them.
Yeah.
They have nets. I mean, oh my
Yeah.
God. Like they had to install nets on these buildings because workers were becoming so depressed. They were jumping off the building.
Yeah.
That's just not something you want to aspire to. I didn't know that he was not only a billionaire, but such a happy billionaire.
Yeah, he loves his money. Doesn't care if you like him or not. He's got money.
I also looked up the worst college dorms in America, and I couldn't find anything useful or credible. I actually just found a bunch of things that linked to articles on the best college dorms in America.
Oh.
So, maybe that's something we got to get on.
Let's write something up.
Yeah.
No, the only thing I can relate to is really bad Army barracks.
Oh.
I mean, we definitely going down in the reserve. There were times they were going to condemn a building, and they said, "Wait, we got these guys coming in for a couple weeks. Let's hold off on that."
Yeah.
Yeah, there were definitely, some barracks with cockroaches and other stuff going on that was not great.
Ew.
That's we looked at a place like that to have our wedding where
A place with cockroaches?
no, it was like
Army
it was this beautiful rooftop overlooking the lake, and we were just and then they had an indoor facility with like a stage and a ballroom, and we're like, this is beautiful. Why is no one else using this building? Oh, it's condemned. Just like,
That could be.
so let's bring 300 of our friends and family to the top of it, and we can all crumble to our
There's
death.
serious asbestos issues. We're
Yeah.
probably limiting you. You just took 3 years off your life. Right
Yeah,
now,
don't
so.
breathe.
Yeah.
Do not breathe.
It
this
is a
air.
great deal, though.
Everybody should wear a mask.
All right. Our top story this week. Lawyer behind Pop-Tart suit has filed more than 400 lawsuits. Last week, we talked about how Kellogg was recently hit with a $5 million lawsuit for false, misleading, and deceptive Pop-Tart marketing. Jeff was just trying to get a little clarity on my dessert fruit aversion, but the story has industry sprawling implications. Food labeling lawsuits are hot right now, and many of them can be traced back to Spencer Sheehan, a New York lawyer who has filed more than 400 lawsuits, many against food and beverage manufacturers. According to NPR, Sheehan has almost single-handedly created a historic spike in class action lawsuits, which are up more than 1,000% since 2008. The lawyer is averaging about 3 new lawsuits a week, going after everything from fudge legitimacy in cookies and brownies, limes in chips, and real milk in pudding. Sheehan wants to challenge companies that cheat consumers, but he could also earn anywhere from 25 to 33% per settlement or award in each case. Jeff, what was your take on the, food and beverage manufacturing crusader?
Here's the problem. He's not wrong.
True.
Like, he's not. Okay, right. I get that. And you do want truth in advertising, truth in packaging, all truth in promotions, all those things. So there's a point.
Agreed.
What I struggle with is there has got to be a better way than sapping company resources to deal with these types of lawsuits. Mm-hmm. You would think there would be a better way to go about doing this, whether it's some sort of, it's kind of like looking for a best case scenario.
Regulation.
No, I don't want regulation. What I'm saying is having a group in the industry that could police themselves and basically saying, hey, look, Keebler, when you're putting fudge on there and you don't have real fudge in there, just knock it off. Otherwise, these guys are going to have to bring a lawsuit. And
your
you're
product
have to
is not made by elves. Be real about it.
The great hand-slapping legislation of 2021.
Because then it would be, look, if you don't do this, you're going to have to deal with a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And what do we want Kellogg's and these other companies dealing with right now? Lawsuits like this or paying people and getting them back to work?
No, I think that's a big part of it. But I feel like people have done that. People are emailing companies, telling companies to do it right. And maybe this is the only thing that gets them to budge.
Okay, but is it really worth a lawsuit to make these changes? Mm. When you pick out if you're going to buy these products, okay, why do you do that? Because it tastes good.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you really scrutinize the packaging and everything else? And I'm not saying that gives them license to put whatever they want on there.
Right.
But again, when I look at the resources that it's taking to deal with this stuff, overloaded court system, not to go down that path too strongly or anything, but all these frivolous lawsuits, this isn't, again, it's hard. It's not frivolous because he's right. Because he's accurate. So that doesn't make it frivolous. It just seems unnecessary to get the change that they're looking for.
Maybe more of a nuisance lawsuit.
Yeah. It seems like there's a better way to get the end result.
Yeah. I do struggle with it too, because I find it hard to draw a line between manufacturer responsibility and human ignorance. Anna, where do you stand on it?
Easy transition.
You set the table. Yeah, I know it is knotted. I agree, because it's you see both sides of it, and the reader comments on this story were pretty intense and like very varied. Like people had very different perspectives on it, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
I like the aged vanilla thing. To me, was pretty flagrant. I think companies for a long time have gotten away with using vague terms like aged or natural. I think we discussed that last week.
Yeah.
And in the past decade or so, there's been a bit of a crackdown on that. For me, it's a fine line. Like I agree, like truth in advertising is important. However, there are some things that like I think exist on packaging maybe for clarity purposes. Like I know there's a lot of lawsuits, or have been a lot of lawsuits about milk by the milk producers, saying that like you cannot call a plant-based milk. Milk is only derived from a cow. But if it's like a nut milk and it's supposed to go on cereal and it's supposed to mimic milk or be a secondary option, then I don't know. Sometimes I think that there's a place for like providing enough information that consumers understand what it's for.
Yeah.
And like for, if you could make that argument for this also, like, so the strawberries don't exist in the food at very high levels, but it's supposed to taste like strawberries, so that's clear, right? So maybe using the word strawberry or putting a strawberry on the package is a way of depicting that, and it's a helpful and necessary thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you go down to the minutia of it and you look at like how it's depicted, what exact words are being said, it's important to clarify what is, usable and what's not, what's appropriate and what's not. But does the consumer get much benefit out of that? I don't know.
Are you saying that? Oh, sorry. Are you saying that you would sooner buy nut milk than like a liquid nut product?
Right. Like I don't think that it's like out of line to try to clarify it in that way. I mean, I think it's pretty clear when people see soy milk and nut milk, people don't think that is coming from a cow.
Right.
Yeah.
They know what that is, but they, I don't think
there's no deliberate intent to deceive or something with those
right.
terms.
It's more intent to clarify, right?
Right. It's cow adjacent.
Cow adjacent.
Your point about the vanilla is actually, Sheehan calls that his most successful case, or one of his most successful cases, was this win that he had against A&W root beer. And a little bit more on that was the beverage boasted of using aged vanilla in the recipe, but it turns out that it was a synthetic vanilla flavoring. And, A&W changed its packaging. It seems like Sheehan got what he wanted. But I got to imagine that if you picked up an A&W root beer and it said synthetic vanilla flavoring on there, maybe you'd think twice.
It depends on where it is. If it's in the ingredients, are you really going to see it? So in this case, okay, if it's plastered on the front of the label saying, what was it, aged vanilla, whatever it was, and they're using that as a promotional tool, okay, maybe there is something to that one. But again, giving these guys a heads up, or A&W, and saying, look, industry standards say you need to put that in the ingredients is more accurate, or this is going to happen. Which, I mean, this guy's a track record now. He's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's going to do it.
So is the conclusion then that everybody has to add like flavored, very tiny next to this stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, or slightly less tiny. Some of it is, like the real milk thing, that was kind of getting down to what is the definition of milk. So because they were using skim milk or non-fat milk, it's not, I didn't know that skim milk is actually by definition not milk.
I didn't either.
But I feel like, where was that conclusion derived from? Was it a lawsuit? I mean, who decided that?
Yeah, and who goes
and who knows and cares?
Yeah,
so. Right.
I mean, but like that's not something. So, in my opinion, there's still milk in that product, even though it's not milk by definition. Yeah. I don't know. It's some of the things were kind of trivial, but again, when I have Hint of Lime chips, I'm not thinking. I'm getting.
You're just getting a hint.
I'm not fighting the scurvy with the vitamin C. I know that I'm eating lime flavored dust on a corn chip.
Right.
And by the bag.
It's not part of your fruit intake for the day.
Yeah, it's a party bag, party of one. I think we need to be smarter shoppers. And though I admittedly am not always, and I can be sold by things like this. So manufacturers do have some responsibility.
They do.
But it just seems easier, to be honest. Because completely agree with you, Anna. Like when you're shopping in a store, you're making a lot of quick decisions. And I think that's where the importance of truth and labeling comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
For sure.
Let's move on to In Case You Missed It. The stories that, weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, let's start with you. What was your In Case You Missed It this week?
Okay, let's do this.
I'm excited.
What did we miss? What did we miss?
Oh, you guys missed this. So a total of 3 fires took place at the Blue Ridge Fiberboard plant in Denville, Virginia between October 17th and October 31st. So that's like a 2-week time period.
Wow.
The latest of which was pegged as being due to built up heat in the manufacturing process. The first fire was on October 17th, and that was blamed on a mechanical error described as oil leaking from a large asphalt boiler.
That sounds bad.
And then the third fire and the second fire were both blamed on heat buildup. So it was actually 2 separate causes for these 3 fires that happened in 2 weeks, which is like kind of a red flag, though I'm not
Agreed.
here to speculate on that exactly. Maybe some problems going on there that need to be addressed. But to me, actually, the bigger story was how much the Blue Ridge Fiberboard plant employees were said to have participated in this firefighting.
Oh.
They were like trying to put out fires when the firefighters got there. There was coverage about how some of them were like on forklifts and like moving product out of the way so the fire wouldn't spread. And after 3 fires, man, I cannot believe that they still had that kind of dedication from their staff to manage this.
Yeah.
And it really made me think like we've really like in the last, 6 months, there's been this narrative about people these days are so lazy and nobody wants to work. And like these are statements that I don't agree with personally, honestly. But,
Right.
I think there's lots of factors influencing the labor shortage, as we've discussed.
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's talk about these dedicated people at Blue Ridge instead of trotting out like that tired narrative. I just think there's still a lot of people out there that are like super hardworking, and man, like this really illustrates it that these people were so dedicated to like
Fight the fire,
man.
Yeah.
And after 3 fires, they're still fighting the fire. And like the last story was like Blue Ridge employees were going to stay overnight and monitor the area.
Man.
Like unbelievable. So I don't know. Let's stop talking about how people don't want to work. People don't work hard. Like enough of that.
So much about employee churn or turnover. These guys are willing to die for their company, which is great. It's great. Like, a lot of that is lost when people talk about work ethic problems.
Yeah.
I hate to think about it, but I would be interested to know what the ages are of the workers. I just see like
that's a good point.
I see these like 68-year-old guys that have been pulled back from retirement so many times, just like, we gotta save the asphalt boiler. Like he's in the fork truck, just like picking things up, like, no, that's the one on fire, bud. Like, but you're right. The employee dedication.
It was just insane reading about it.
Well,
I was
the
like, I couldn't believe
dedication and also what they're really doing is potentially preventing those firefighters and those other people from rushing into an area that they don't know as well. These workers obviously do. They understand all the materials that are involved and what could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sacrifice is pretty inspiring. It's
It
pretty
is.
cool.
And to be clear, I'm not saying like to be a hero and fight a fire at your plant. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But
Unless you want Anna to talk about you on the podcast.
Yeah.
no, I'll still
Be a hero to Anna.
send me an email. I'll still talk about you.
Send an
Be a
email about
hero.
how they thought about it.
Be a hero. Don't be a hero. I will still talk about you.
Just don't call him superhero because that is trademarked.
That is trademarked. Yeah.
Oh, very good. No, that's I wonder if they get any sort of, I hate to say compensation, but there has to be like a hazard pay bump if you're
give
fighting a fire.
These people a raise, man.
Right? All right. Jeff, what is your, in case you missed it, any more heroic employees?
I'm not going to say heroic employees, but maybe some chances for others to show their heroism potentially because the Pentagon was rattled by a Chinese military push, basically calling a recent successful testing of a hypersonic weapon by China, a Sputnik-like event referencing the satellite launched by Russia in the late 50s that kind of spawned the space race. Basically, the Pentagon has a lot of concerns over China's growth and their expansion of their nuclear arsenal and advances in space, cyber, and missile technologies, as well as threats to Taiwan in that area.
Right.
And I thought this hit home on a couple of fronts. Number one, we're talking about China in a military perspective. We've always talked about them from an industrial perspective, a competitor financially, and now it's getting into the military side of things, which aside from any political concerns, which there are plenty throughout Asia, there's also, when we talk about addressing military shortcomings potentially, that leads to a lot more spending. We've been in a phase where there's been a bit of reduced military spending. So when you look at companies who are military contractors like, I don't know, Boeing, who's not had a great time of it lately. Yeah. You wonder how, if there is a ramp up, if there is an expansion in defense spending, what will that mean to some of these companies here in the U.S., the big contractors? The other thing that caught my eye was he talked about cybersecurity. Yeah. And that being a huge potential weapon that China is using to infiltrate not just Department of Defense and military type applications, but industrial ones, manufacturers. I mean, we've talked about IP challenges, people stealing IP from, in Chinese companies taking American IP and developing knockoff products. Well, now it's being state sponsored. So it expands concerns there as well. We've talked about cybersecurity a ton on the show, okay, and throughout the sites and everything else. But now when we see those two areas potentially impacting industrial output, could be very interesting to see what happens.
I found it interesting that Putin and Russia recently said that they were kind of going to double down or invest heavily in hypersonics as well.
And lasers. He wants lasers.
Very specific request.
Don't ask him what for.
For what?
Don't ask.
All right, sorry.
He wants lasers.
I mean, I got to look more into that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting memo. I want hypersonics and make the lasers happen.
I want laser pointers. No reason.
No reason.
Anna, any thoughts on the implications of the Chinese hypersonic push?
It was interesting for sure. Obviously the U.S. is doing this stuff as well. Do we know how credible? I'm assuming it came from the military. It's pretty credible that this is real. I know China in the past has done some kind of smoke and mirrors type stuff about their tech developments.
The hypersonic definitely looks valid in terms of what they were able to do. Basically, taking what was unique is they actually were able to send it into space and have it come back.
Wow.
So that would make it even tougher to detect and find, which could definitely be the instigation for even more dollars being funneled towards those types of programs, not just in developing those missiles, but in developing defense systems against them.
Well, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about what were the near-term applications, and maybe they're coming faster than we thought.
All right. In case you missed it this week, was Ford unveils an EV motor in a concept electric vehicle. Ford is pouring billions into electric vehicle and battery factories in anticipation of a rapid shift to electric vehicles. This week at the SEMA Auto Show in Las Vegas, the company introduced a new EV motor. The Illuminator electric crate motor is based on the motor in the Mustang Mach-E GT. And to show it off, they put it in the F100 Illuminator, a zero-emission concept pickup based on the 1978 model of the same name. And it is a sweet-looking ride. The concept truck features two Illuminator motors to facilitate all-wheel drive, and it produces 480 horsepower and 634 foot-pounds of torque. And I wish I knew more about that than what it just says on the page. The motor would allow builders to electrify modern and vintage cars, trucks, and SUVs. The motor retails for $3,900, but they didn't disclose how much the company dropped to make the F100 Illuminator. And they were quite clear that it is not for sale. I've never seen so much legal speak on a press release says, you cannot buy it, stop asking. I feel like they've had some requests. The move is another step towards the company's efforts to sell turnkey aftermarket electrification products. And I was just thinking, when you have something like a 1962 Rambler that gets 12 miles per gallon,
who would have that?
Something like this motor might pay for itself rather quickly. What do you think, producer Eric? He loves it. Jeff, what were your thoughts on the new motor beyond the fact that this truck just looks cool?
It does. Looks awesome. This is really cool. And what it really does is I think it preserves some of that the gearheads out there who still want to tinker and still want to play around with cars and get in there, and it allows them to take a body like this and drop an EV in there. That's pretty cool. As far as the torque numbers and the horsepower, what that really means for a truck like this, you can pull stuff. Like it's not just environmentally friendly. It can be used for real world stuff. You can tow a boat. You can do what you want to do with what you would normally do with a truck. So I'm on board, man. I think this is awesome.
Yeah. I do like the idea of, sort of people in their garage electrifying old cars. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah, well, and it'd be interesting to, we have no clue like at what point in time actual gasoline powered engines are going to be just gone. Yeah. But there is definitely a market for retrofitting, I would think. So it's kind of a cool idea, and you haven't seen much of it elsewhere. So I'm excited to see people start to use this.
It did remind me of Zero Labs Automotive, which is based in Hawthorne, California. That's a really cool company that restores and modifies classic vehicles. The company started with the original Land Rover Series 3 109 wagon and the first generation Ford Bronco, and they look really cool, but boy, are they expensive.
Really?
Yeah, the company re-engineers the body with new components to attach it to a full battery electric chassis. So it's not just, plug and play EV motor. They make built-to-order commissions that start at $185,000.
So if this motor from Ford retails at like $4,000, what's their all-in cost on electrifying your own vehicle?
I'm not sure because all these auxiliary parts that they're looking to market obviously are going to come into play. It's not like you can just get the motor.
Yeah, it's not just the motor. It's in the battery. It's the drivetrain and everything else.
Yeah.
So it would be a very intense build. But again, look at some of these vehicles that do get restored and the amount of money that's spent on them. And it also creates a secondary market for all of these parts. So with over time, it'd be interesting to see how the supply chain sort of changes, potentially for an onslaught of EVs and what you can do here now with them now and tuning them up.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the road looks like to a fully EV cars on the road. But I have to imagine that when that happens, gasoline will spike, and having an old car that still is, taking gas, you might be cost out of actually running the thing.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. All right. The other thing that I found interesting was from Mark Rushbrook. He's the global director of Ford Performance. He said, quote, "The fact is, electric performance is fun. And as the industry moves forward toward electric vehicles, motorsports and the performance aftermarket will too." I just found that to be interesting that he's like, no, driving an EV is fun. Like, interesting selling point.
Well, there's all these EV race cars now, and it's pretty, are you losing out? It looks pretty cool to me.
Yeah, it's what was the fun truck that recovered the other day? It's just the Toyota's new EV.
What was it called
again? It's a fun truck.
Yeah, that was
It's good that the automotive industry is just getting to be fun out there.
They're having a lot of fun out there. Right now is a great year to have fun in the automotive market, as we've covered many times.
Right,
as long as building cars is easy.
Building cars is easy. Getting the parts are easy.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our final thoughts this week. Anna, before we get out of here, what is your final thought?
Well, I just wanted to update. Some of you wrote in and asked about Halloween and my kids, which was super nice. They had an amazing time. We trick-or-treated for 90 minutes, which to me is like an insane amount of time to be doing that. Yep. But the enthusiasm did not wane. I had 2 Disney princesses and a dragon, a very ferocious dragon, and they got all the candy in the world. So
90 minutes of trick-or-treating is a lifetime out there.
It is so long. And I was like, oh, another block. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah. And then we just went on and on and on. Yep.
I think we've asked about it before, but now that I have the full bucket of candy in my pantry, realistically, where can you get at with the dad or parent tax on that candy?
Oh, I always look at it like it is my responsibility as a parent not to let my kid eat all this because it's not good for them. So I will fall on that sword and just take, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Just be smart because it can start out low, but then it can exponentially increase with time as they forget about said candy.
Yeah. I think it's already forgotten at my house. Like it's in the laundry room. I already hid it. It's gone.
We did not make it 90 minutes. I had a Chase from Paw Patrol and a dragon as well. And we made it around the block, and he was really excited. And then he's just like, I'm freezing. I'm just like,
It's like, why are we out at night, Dad?
Yeah.
What? It's so dark.
do you want to get more candy? Yeah, but I'm freezing. Just like, all right. And so I'm like, let's just take a break.
Mm-hmm.
We go home, and he's just like, I'm done trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Just, he got
Smart.
he got his 2 Tootsie Rolls and was a happy camper. Jeff, how was your Halloween?
It was good. We didn't have a lot of trick-or-treaters, but I treated myself to about 7 beers while I was waiting.
Yeah.
So it was a good day.
I gotta say, the adult part of trick-or-treating, I was kind of surprised by that. The number of neighbors that are willing to offer free beverages. And it also, I didn't think anyone was going to smoke me out, but the one neighbor that noticed that my kid was using a Fireball branded bucket, I was both very happy for the neighbor to realize that, but then walked away like, oh, they really think a lot of me. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
This weekend I'm looking forward to again heading up north.
Yeah.
Should be like one of the last like nice weekends we have to get up there and chase the elusive muskellunge.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a real thing. That's not like the hodag. That's a real fish.
Yeah,
The hodag is real, Jeff.
Oh, my bad.
Jeff, are you going to that same place that you've gone to in the past?
No, we're going up to Eagle River. Do a little grouse hunting, little musky fishing. So it should be fun.
I hear they have a great children's museum as well.
They do.
We will not be checking that out.
It's so fun, Jeff. Go.
My final thought this week is that I've been finding myself buying more exotic nuts these days.
Can you define?
And sometimes you just have to stick with the classics.
Can you define an exotic nut?
Give it an example, please.
The nut game is getting weird out there, where there's all kinds of powders and flavors of nuts in terms of different clusters. You get granola with the nuts, all different types of nut options out there. And I was I was eating a hot honey nut last night, walnut, and I was just eating it thinking, you know what? I think this would just be better as a plain walnut. I will admit, I'm enticed by good marketing.
Are you channeling like your inner Charlie from Always Sunny? This seems like a conversation he would have.
Oh, I mean, no, but I feel like I always am.
Yeah.
I got that same wild card mentality when it gets weird. But no, it's just, I get it. You got to diversify in a flooded market, and so you start getting weird with the nuts. Sometimes I just need a shelled pistachio, and that's it.
Those are a lot of work.
They are, but I mean, what else are you doing when you're like sitting at home watching TV? That's the perfect time.
Yeah, you get that delicious meat, and then you throw the shell in the bowl. It makes the clink. Actually, I'm going to go get some right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Classics, though, not hot pistachios combined with some sort of granola and then in a maple glaze.
Yeah. Trader Joe's has some like, they're like chili or whatever pistachios.
Yeah.
That you still shell, but they're super like greasy and don't do that.
Yeah, they're greasy, or if they have that cheddar flavoring, it's just like it's worse than the Dorito hands.
Yeah.
It's just like I can't lick them because then I get more on it. Oh, I'm sunk here.
Yeah.
All right. Also, before we get out of here, we've been getting a lot of requests for the Today in Manufacturing t-shirts. So we're going to continue that giveaway. If you want a Today in Manufacturing podcast t-shirt, we really appreciate you guys helping represent the podcast. Just email any one of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com. Anna, so I saw that you tried the shirt on during the show. Did you take it home? Or
I kept it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm still using it.
Very good.
Trick-or-treating in it.
What's it? Oh, brand recognition everywhere.
I'm
always.
dressed.
All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And to email the podcast, you can reach any of us, like I said, at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first. All right. For Jeff and Anna, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.